Before the sun touches the eastern bank, before the first red line appears above the Nile, the palace is already awake. Lamps burn low in corridors of painted mud brick. Guards shift their weight in the cool darkness. Servants move softly across floors where images of bound enemies may lie beneath the royal feet. A statement that disorder belongs below and the king above, beyond the walls. The river is a black ribbon, the fields are invisible, and the temples wait with their doors sealed. Somewhere inside the royal apartments, the ruler still sleeps, yet even in sleep, he is not merely a private man. His body is guarded as part of the state, protected by attendants, walls, locks, and ritual words. No surviving Egyptian diary records this hour minute by minute. What follows must be rebuilt from fragments, palace ruins at Malqata and Amarna, court scenes carved in tombs, diplomatic letters impressed into clay, temple rituals, and a much later Greek writer who claimed that the king's day and night were closely ordered. None of these sources allows us to watch one known pharaoh rise from one known bed on one ordinary morning. Together, however, they reveal the shape of royal life and allow a careful reconstruction of what the first hour before dawn may have felt like inside the palace. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. The king's chamber is not a block of cold stone like the interior of a tomb. Royal residences were often built from mud brick, plastered smooth and painted in vivid colours. At Malqata, the palace of Amenhotep III, ceilings and floors carried marsh scenes, birds, plants, and flowing designs. At Amarna, palatial buildings included private rooms, service areas, storage spaces, throne platforms, courtyards, and guarded routes. The evidence remains incomplete, and archaeologists still debate the function of many rooms, but the surviving plans dispel the fantasy of a silent stone fortress. The palace was a living organism of clay, timber, paint, textiles, smoke, food, paperwork, and human motion. In the royal apartments, the air before dawn may hold traces of oil, incense, dust, and cooling plaster. Curtains or wooden screens divide spaces. Chests contain linen, jewellery, cosmetics, seals, and objects of practical and ceremonial value. The king may sleep on a wooden bed, surrounded not by empty grandeur but by a controlled network of people. Access to him is restricted. Doors matter. Corridors matter. The identity of every person allowed to pass matters. The palace is magnificent, but magnificence does not remove danger. It concentrates it. Egyptian kingship presents the ruler as the defender of Maat, the ordered condition of the world. Maat is truth, balance, justice, the reliable rising of the sun, the return of the flood, and the defeat of forces that threaten creation. Its opposite, Isfet, is violence, falsehood, rebellion, hunger, invasion, broken ritual, broken loyalty, and the possibility that the world may slip from its pattern. Official inscriptions describe the king as the one who restores temples, crushes enemies, feeds the gods, rewards the loyal, and keeps the two lands united. Such texts are political ideals rather than private confessions, but they reveal the role he must inhabit when he wakes. The man in the bed is mortal. The office around him is divine. Ancient Egyptians could treat kingship as sacred without believing that every ruler was physically immortal. A pharaoh could become sick, age, fail, be betrayed, or die. The king's divine character belonged above all to the institution he embodied, to his relation with Horus while living and Osiris after death, and to his duty to stand between gods, people, and chaos. In official art, that duty looks effortless. The king is larger than everyone else, his enemies already defeated. In the dark before dawn, reality must have been less certain. There were practical reasons for vigilance. Egyptian sources preserve memories of rulers threatened from within their households. The teaching of Amenemhat imagines a king warning his successor after an attack at night, when trust failed and protection was absent. Much later, the conspiracy against Rameses III involved members of the royal establishment, officials, soldiers, and ritual specialists. A judicial papyrus records the trials in guarded language, while modern examination of the king's mummy revealed a deep wound in the neck consistent with assassination. These cases do not prove that every pharaoh lay awake fearing murder. We cannot know the daily emotions of people dead for 3,000 years. Yet they show that royal danger was real. The threat could come from beyond the frontier, but it could also pass through a palace doorway. So the guards before dawn are not decorative. They watch entrances and control the movement of servants. A messenger arriving at night may be held until the proper official receives him. A physician could be summoned. A trusted chamberlain might enter where a lesser official cannot. The palace hierarchy is mapped onto space outer courts for many, inner rooms for a few, and the sleeping king at the center of a narrowing system of permission. What survives suggests that access itself was a form of power. Outside, another protected body waits in darkness, the cult statue within a temple sanctuary. Across Egypt, priests prepare to open sealed shrines, burn incense, reveal divine images, clothe them, anoint them, feed them, and close the doors again. Officially, the pharaoh performs these acts. In practice, purified priests usually act in his name. Even while the king sleeps, his ritual identity is working through thousands of hands. The sovereign cannot be everywhere, yet ideology requires him to stand everywhere. Every offering made in his name extends his presence beyond the palace walls. The hours are not measured like ours. Day and night are divided into 12 parts whose length changes with the seasons. Water clocks, shadow clocks, and observation organize activity. But there is no palace clock announcing 5:30 in the morning. Time is felt through stars, darkness, ritual sequence, cooling air, and the approach of light. The first hour of day begins not with a mechanical chime, but with the sky changing color. Soon, attendants will begin the controlled process of waking the ruler. Letters may be waiting. Reports may have arrived from Nubia, the Delta, or the Levant. Priests may be preparing ceremonies. Officials may already be rehearsing petitions and deciding who will be permitted to approach. Linen will be readied, water carried, oils opened, and symbols of authority selected according to the demands of the day. But for a little longer, the palace remains balanced between night and sunrise. In that narrow interval, the pharaoh is both least visible and most vulnerable, a sleeping human being enclosed within the machinery of a god. The first change is almost invisible. A servant notices the thinning darkness near an opening high in the wall. Another hears movement from the outer court. Somewhere a water clock has emptied to its next mark. No trumpet announces that the ruler must wake. The transition begins through trained attention and quiet signals. The king does not simply open his eyes and rise. He is received back into the world. What happens next cannot be reconstructed as a fixed routine for every dynasty. The only ancient author who describes a nearly complete royal schedule is Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BCE, long after the palace age of Amenhotep III and Akhenaten. He says that the Egyptian king's day and night were governed by prescribed times, and that after waking he received letters, attended to business, washed, dressed, offered sacrifice, listened to prayers, and followed a carefully ordered sequence. His account is valuable, but it presents an ideal king whose discipline proves his virtue. It is not a surviving timetable from a New Kingdom bedroom. The morning must therefore be imagined cautiously, with each detail resting between evidence and inference. Attendants enter only when permitted. Their presence turns the chamber from a private sleeping space into the first room of government. Linen is brought, water is carried in jars or basins, oils, combs, cosmetic containers, razors, and folded garments may be arranged nearby. No text records the exact order in which a particular pharaoh washed his face, had his hair prepared, or received his clothing. Yet objects from elite life and images of royal presentation show that the body was carefully managed. Cleanliness here is not merely comfort. Before sacred or formal activity, purification separates the ordered royal person from dust, sweat, sleep, and the ordinary condition of the body. The water itself carries meaning. The Nile sustains Egypt, but ritual purity often depends on controlled water drawn, stored, poured, and used in prescribed contexts. The king may wash or bathe, though the evidence does not justify a cinematic scene of marble pools and endless attendants. Palace architecture at Amarna and elite houses include spaces interpreted as washing or purification areas, often made from plastered mud brick with drainage arrangements. These rooms belong to a practical world of vessels, wet floors, and labour. Every clean surface depends on someone carrying water, maintaining containers, and removing what has been used. The ruler's hair and skin are treated as parts of the royal image. Oils may soften the skin in Egypt's dry climate and add fragrance. Kohl around the eyes is more than a single black powder with one standard recipe. Chemical analysis of ancient cosmetic containers reveals varied mixtures of lead minerals, fats, waxes, and organic materials. Some may have had protective or medicinal effects, but scholars still debate how specific formulas were used. The familiar dark outline around Egyptian eyes served beauty, identity, and perhaps protection against glare. Yet on the king it also helped create the face expected by the court. Hair is equally complex. Elite Egyptians sometimes cut their natural hair short or shaved parts of the head. While wearing elaborate wigs on formal occasions, one surviving 14th century BCE wig required hundreds of clusters of human hair attached to a netted foundation with beeswax and resin. A modern reconstruction demanded roughly 200 hours of work. That investment shows that royal appearance began long before mourning. Artisans, servants, suppliers, and specialists had already shaped the materials that would frame the king's face. The pharaoh's image was not spontaneous. It was manufactured through accumulated labour. This does not mean he emerges from bed covered in gold. Popular images often load the royal body with bracelets, collars, rings, sandals, crowns, and shining plates from dawn until night. The evidence is more restrained. Gold was deeply associated with the sun, the gods, endurance, status, reward, and diplomacy, but it was used selectively. A morning of private administration may require fine linen and modest insignia. A temple appearance, formal audience, festival, or reward ceremony could demand a more elaborate display. The choice of clothing depends on what the king must become for the people waiting outside. Even the crown is uncertain. Egyptian art shows the white crown of Upper Egypt, the red crown of Lower Egypt, the combined double crown, the blue capreche, and the striped Nemes headcloth. Yet no original royal crown has been securely identified in the archaeological record. Some may have been inherited, dismantled, or made partly from perishable materials such as cloth, leather, fibre, or basketry. The servant lifting a solid gold crown from a chest is therefore an attractive invention, not established fact. What can be said is that headgear transformed the ruler's silhouette. Once placed upon him, it made the office visible before he spoke. The body beneath these materials remains human. It may be tired, stiff, ill, scarred, or aging. Royal art rarely grants such vulnerability. It smooths the flesh, straightens the shoulders, enlarges the figure, and removes hesitation. But medical papyri, mummies, and skeletal evidence from Egypt show a world familiar with pain, infection, dental disease, injury, parasites, and physical decline. A pharaoh could command physicians and obtain costly ingredients, yet privilege could not abolish mortality. The ritual of preparation may therefore be understood as an act of concealment as much as display. The court must see continuity even when the person carrying it feels fragile. While attendants work, information may already begin to enter. Diodorus places letters first after waking, but whether that sequence applied to New Kingdom rulers is unknown. A chamberlain, herald, or senior official might summarize urgent news before a full audience. Foreign tablets written in Akkadian would require scribes and translators. Reports from estates, temples, garrisons, mines, or construction projects would pass through layers of administration. The king's morning is surrounded by voices he may never hear directly, condensed into messages selected by trusted officials. Power gives access to information, but it also creates dependence on those who control it. The transformation is nearly complete. Fresh linen rests against washed skin. Oil catches the first weak light. Coal sharpens the eyes. A wig, headcloth, or formal headdress may alter the shape of the head. Jewelry and insignia are chosen not merely for beauty but for the meaning required that day. The person who awoke in darkness is becoming the ruler who can be seen. Outside the chamber, the palace waits in layers. Servants hold vessels. Guards face the corridor. Scribes prepare tablets and rolls. Officials rehearse the order of approach. Priests in distant sanctuaries begin purification, preparing to act in the king's name before the gods. When the pharaoh steps forward, he will not be entering an ordinary morning. He will be crossing from privacy into performance, from mortal vulnerability into the machinery of sacred rule. The first corridor beyond the royal apartments changes the meaning of everything the king wears. Inside the chamber, linen, oil, cosmetics, and jewelry prepare a body. Outside it, those same materials become language. A broad collar can declare wealth and divine favour. A particular headcloth can mark authority. Sandals can place defeated enemies beneath the royal feet. Even the folds of linen help separate the ruler from those waiting to approach him. The court does not merely see a man dressed for the day. It sees a constructed image of Egypt itself. Fine linen is among the most important materials in that image. Egyptian cloth could be woven with extraordinary skill, and elite garments may appear almost transparent in art, though artists also use stylized conventions rather than literal portraiture. The king's clothing was probably finer than that of most subjects, yet the familiar formula of white linen against gold skin can deceive. It presents purity and order, not a reliable inventory of everything worn at every moment. The evidence suggests variety according to setting and rank. A private administrative mourning need not resemble a temple festival or a victory celebration. The labour behind a royal garment begins far from the throne. Flax must be cultivated, harvested, soaked, beaten, spun, woven, bleached, folded, stored, and transported. Skilled workers produce cloth for temples, estates, and the palace. Garments may be washed, repaired, perfumed, and reassigned. In a state built on controlled labour and agricultural surplus, linen is not merely fabric, it is organised time. When the pharaoh steps into a clean garment, he wears the work of fields, workshops, storerooms, scribes, and transport crews whose names usually disappear from the record. Gold carries a wider geography. Much of Egypt's gold came through the eastern desert and Nubia, where mining, quarrying, washing, crushing, and transport demanded logistical control. Recent research shows that Bronze Age Egyptian gold included alluvial material separated from sediments, as well as gold extracted from quartz-bearing rock. The source of every object cannot be identified, and scholars still debate the techniques. What remains clear is that gold at court represents far more than beauty. It is the visible end of military reach, desert knowledge, human endurance, and state extraction. A bracelet may therefore carry the silence of distant mining camps. Workers and administrators had to secure water, food, tools, pack animals, and routes through harsh landscapes. Forts helped maintain Egyptian influence in Nubia. Ore or gold-bearing material moved through chains of processing, before artisans transformed it into sheet, wire, beads, inlays, and fittings. Some gold was mixed with silver, producing electrum, while refining may have been more sophisticated than assumed. Recent analysis has raised the possibility that salt-based separation techniques were used earlier in Egypt than older histories allowed, though the interpretation rests on material signatures rather than an intact ancient manual. This matters because royal gold is often described as if it belongs naturally to the king, as sunlight made solid and placed upon a divine body. Egyptian symbolism encouraged that association. Gold was enduring, untarnished, brilliant, and linked with the flesh of the gods. Yet its sacred meaning did not erase its economic origin. Every object had been found, collected, washed, heated, hammered, measured, guarded, and carried. The palace turned labour into radiance. The king does not necessarily wear all available ornaments at once. A broad collar may be selected for formal appearance. Bracelets, armlets, rings, pendants, or pectorals may carry divine symbols, royal names, protective images, or references to renewal. Some pieces could be inherited or used in ritual contexts. Others served as diplomatic gifts, rewards, temple property, or funerary equipment. Gold was not restricted absolutely to the pharaoh. High officials and other elites possessed it as well. The distinction lay in access, symbolism, and the ruler's ability to distribute it. That power to distribute may matter more than the power to wear. At Amarna, scenes of the window of appearance show the royal family presenting gold to favoured officials. The king and queen stand above, framed by architecture, while recipients below raise their arms or display the collars awarded to them. Though idealized, these scenes reveal a political truth. Gold could turn loyalty into something visible. It could honor service, bind an official to the crown, and allow status to be displayed before rivals. A necklace was not merely a reward. It was a public statement that royal favor had descended upon one person and not another. Foreign rulers understood the same principle. In the Amarna correspondence, kings from Western Asia repeatedly discuss Egyptian gold. They request it, complain about its quantity or purity, and compare gifts as measures of friendship and rank. Egypt's access to gold helped shape international diplomacy. A shipment could support alliance, marriage, prestige, or competition among courts claiming greatness. The substance shining on the pharaoh's body therefore also circulates beyond Egypt, carrying messages that armies and ambassadors understand. Headgear adds another meaning. The king may wear a Nemes cloth, a blue capreche, or another formal headdress according to context. But the archaeological silence surrounding royal crowns remains striking. No surviving object can be confidently identified as one of the famous crowns shown in reliefs and statues. They may have been passed from ruler to ruler, dismantled, hidden, or made from materials that decayed. Their colours and forms survive more securely in representation than in physical remains. The most recognizable symbols of kingship are therefore also among its greatest material absences. This absence warns against treating royal images as photographs. A wall scene may show the king in perfect profile, holding symbols of dominion, wearing an elaborate crown, and receiving life from a god. It tells us how kingship wished to be seen. It does not prove the pharaoh dressed that way through breakfast, correspondence, inspection, and rest. Artistic conventions compress time and meaning. They place ritual, politics, and theology into one stable body that never sweats, stumbles, or adjusts an uncomfortable collar. As the ruler advances, attendants may carry fans, staffs, containers, or additional regalia. Officials recognize the signs. The materials around him announce wealth, but also controlled access to resources. Linen speaks of purity and production. Gold speaks of divinity, mining, diplomacy, and reward. Crowns speak of territories joined under one ruler, even when the original objects have vanished. The royal image seems effortless, only because the work that creates it has been pushed beyond the frame. By the time he reaches the next guarded space, the pharaoh has become a moving concentration of the kingdom. Fields, mines, workshops, temples, foreign alliances, and conquered landscapes have been gathered onto one human figure. The display is beautiful, but it is not light. Each ornament adds another promise the ruler must keep, another system he must command, and another audience waiting to judge whether the brilliance still means power. The officials waiting beyond the next doorway do not bring the world to the king in its raw form. They bring it compressed, translated, ranked, and arranged. A report from a frontier commander may have crossed hundreds of miles before reaching the palace. A complaint from a provincial estate may have passed through several scribes. A clay tablet from a foreign ruler may have been read, copied, summarized, and discussed before the pharaoh ever hears its contents. The first words of mourning are therefore never simply news. They are news already shaped by the machinery of administration. Diodorus Siculus, writing more than 1,000 years after the height of the New Kingdom, claimed that the Egyptian king received letters soon after waking and dealt with affairs in the order prescribed for him. His description cannot be treated as a literal timetable for every pharaoh. yet it captures something plausible about royal government. Urgent information had to reach the ruler early, and those who controlled access to that information possessed enormous influence. The king may command the state, but he does not see the state directly. He sees what trusted officials decide must be seen. A senior chamberlain, herald, vizier, or secretary may begin with matters judged most pressing. The titles and exact duties changed across time, and the evidence remains incomplete. But Egyptian administration was highly layered. The great herald, known from court contexts, helped manage access, announce people, and carry royal words between the ruler and those below him. Scribes recorded, copied, and archived decisions. Translators handled foreign languages. Courtiers understood that the order of presentation could alter the weight of a problem. A rebellion announced first feels different from a request placed after tax accounts and building reports. At Amarna, the surviving archive of diplomatic correspondence offers the clearest sense of what might lie behind such a morning briefing. Hundreds of tablets, mostly written in Akkadian cuneiform, preserve messages sent to the Egyptian court by rulers of Babylonia, Assyria, Mitanni, Hatti, and smaller Levantine kingdoms. Their subjects range from marriage negotiations and exchanges of luxury goods to pleas for military help, accusations against rivals, and anxious reports of local instability. The tablets were found in a zone associated with royal correspondence, close to the administrative heart of the city. They do not record one morning in sequence, but they reveal the kind of world pressing against the palace doors. The pharaoh may not read these tablets personally. Their wedge-shaped signs belong to a scribal tradition, different from Egyptian hieroglyphs and hieratic, and the officials trained to interpret them form a narrow intellectual bridge between courts. A tablet might arrive enclosed in clay, bearing seals or traces of handling, then enter an archive where its physical placement mattered almost as much as its precise wording. Akkadian served as an international diplomatic language, and specialists were needed to understand it. Many letters begin with formulas that effectively mean "speak to the king," suggesting oral presentation. A scribe or interpreter may therefore read aloud while another official explains the political context. Names of distant cities, rival princes, envoys, horses, chariots, gold, and marriage partners fill the room. The king hears not only words but competing performances of loyalty. Every correspondent wants something. Every correspondent claims urgency. Every correspondent understands that distance can hide exaggeration. One vassal may insist that neighbouring rulers are traitors. Another may accuse the first of causing the unrest. A great king abroad may complain that the gold sent from Egypt is too little, too impure, or unworthy of his status. Another may seek an Egyptian princess and discover that royal daughters are not offered lightly in return. Some rulers flatter the pharaoh as a brother. Others kneel rhetorically as servants beneath his feet. The language shifts with rank, and diplomacy becomes a theatre of hierarchy written into clay. Yet the world brought to the king is larger than foreign affairs. Reports may concern grain, labour, quarrying, temple estates, construction, river transport, taxation, or the movement of officials. A mining expedition in Nubia depends on water, food, guards, and pack animals. A temple restoration requires stone, wood, copper tools, trained workers, and allocations of grain. A garrison commander may need supplies before a distant threat becomes a crisis. Even the palace kitchens, workshops, and storerooms rely on records moving upward through chains of responsibility. The surprising detail is how much royal power depends on small material things. A broken seal can raise suspicion. A missing delivery can expose theft. A damaged tablet can obscure a name. A delayed boat can make a royal order arrive too late. The state appears immense in monumental inscriptions, yet its daily function rests on fragile records, human memory, and the reliability of messengers crossing deserts and rivers. One cracked jar label or misunderstood phrase cannot overthrow Egypt by itself, but thousands of such failures can weaken the illusion that everything is under control. Not every message demands the pharaoh's personal decision. Much is handled by officials acting within established authority. The ruler's direct involvement may be reserved for appointments, major disputes, foreign relations, military movements, large grants, temple policy, or issues touching succession and loyalty. Scholars still debate how frequently individual kings intervened in routine administration. The record favours exceptional acts because exceptional acts are the ones more likely to be inscribed, copied, or preserved. There's also silence in the briefing. No system delivers perfect knowledge. Officials may soften bad news, delay accusations, protect allies, or frame rivals as dangerous. Foreign rulers may exaggerate threats to obtain troops. Provincial administrators may conceal shortages. The pharaoh's power cannot free him from uncertainty, because uncertainty is built into distance. The more territory he claims to command, the more dependent he becomes on people who stand between reality and the throne. This is where the weight of fear first enters the morning in practical form, not panic, and not the melodramatic terror of a ruler trembling behind gold doors, but the quieter burden of never knowing whether a report is complete. A boarder appears calm until a messenger says otherwise. A courtier appears loyal until another presents evidence of conspiracy. A harvest seems sufficient until account tablets reveal missing grain. The king must decide while knowing that every decision rests on information filtered by ambition, delay, and error. The final message of the first briefing may be less dramatic than war, a petition delayed, a workshop behind schedule, an official requesting audience. Yet even such matters reveal the same structure. The ruler's day has begun not with certainty, but with interpretation. Around him stand men trained to read signs, records, faces, and rank. Outside, more petitioners gather. Inside, the king listens as the kingdom is spoken into existence, one selected problem at a time. The king has heard the first reports of the morning, but the palace has been working long before any message reaches him. Behind the rooms, beyond painted halls and guarded thresholds, a vast network of labour is already in motion. Bread is being baked, beer strained, water carried, storerooms opened, animals fed, floors swept, linen counted, and deliveries checked against written records. The royal household appears to revolve around one person, yet in practice it depends on hundreds of people whose names rarely survive. A palace is not simply a residence. It is an administrative centre, a ceremonial stage, a warehouse, a workshop, a kitchen complex, and a place of reception. The ruler's breakfast, clothing, gifts, audiences, and rituals all emerge from systems that begin in fields, villages, mines, quarries, estates, and river ports. By the time food reaches a royal table, it has passed through cultivation, taxation, transport, storage, preparation, inspection, and service. Every loaf represents planning, every jar represents accounting, every meal depends on the Nile. Bread and beer form the nutritional foundation of much of Egyptian life, from workers' rations to temple offerings. Grain arrives from estates and tax collections, then enters granaries where scribes measure and record it, millers grind it, bakers shape it, and brewers transform it through processes that remain debated because ancient images simplify complex work. Elite households could draw on finer products, varied breads, wine, meat, poultry, fish, fruits, vegetables, oils, honey, and cakes. Yet no complete daily menu of a known pharaoh survives. Banquet scenes show abundance and status, while offerings present an ideal of eternal provision. They are not photographs of an ordinary morning meal. Diodorus later claimed that Egyptian kings consumed prescribed amounts of particular foods and wine, presenting royal restraint as part of moral discipline. His account is too late to establish what Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, or Ramesses II ate at dawn. It may preserve a tradition of regulated kingship, but it cannot supply a reliable menu. What survives suggests access to exceptional variety rather than proof of constant feasting. The pharaoh may eat modestly before business, dine formally with selected companions, or receive food according to ritual expectations. A large kitchen does not make every meal a spectacle. Royal kitchens require specialized spaces and carefully timed work. Grain must be protected from damp, pests, theft, and spoilage. Meat and fish demand quick processing, salting, drying, cooking, or distribution in a climate where heat shortens the life of food. Wine jars need labels, seals, and storage. Oils, fruits, and spices travel from different regions. Potters supply vessels, carpenters make boxes, trays, and tools. Metalworkers maintain knives and equipment. Servants remove ash, waste, bones, broken pottery, and used water. The palace's polished image rests on constant acts of cleaning and disposal that official art rarely celebrates. This invisible labor extends far beyond food. Workshops associated with royal and temple institutions produce furniture, ceremonial objects, chariots, weapon fittings, jewelry, textiles, and painted decoration. Some workers are highly trained specialists whose skills are closely managed. Others perform repetitive tasks that leave few individual traces. Deliveries are weighed and counted. Materials are issued. Finished goods are inspected. A shortage of wood, copper, resin, linen, or pigment can delay a project that the king has promised to a god or foreign ally. The palace also consumes information about itself. Scribes track stores, workers, land, livestock, rations, and obligations. Seal impressions control access to containers and rooms. Labels identify contents, origins, dates, or responsible officials. A jar of wine may carry the name of an estate and a year of production. A storeroom is not merely a room full of goods, it is an archive written in clay, ink, rope, stoppers, and ceilings. When these systems work, the palace appears effortlessly supplied. When they fail, missing grain or broken seals can reveal negligence, corruption, or theft. Servants do not form one undifferentiated mass. The household includes administrators, attendants, guards, cooks, bakers, brewers, cleaners, craftspeople, stable workers, musicians, messengers, physicians, tutors, and specialists whose roles overlap with temple and state institutions. Some may hold respected positions and manage considerable resources. Others occupy vulnerable levels of the hierarchy. The exact organization changes across periods, and the evidence remains incomplete. But royal life clearly depended on expertise as much as obedience. Even the institution often called the royal harem belongs within this wider system. Modern imagination reduces it to secluded women waiting for the king, but Egyptian royal households were more complicated. They could include royal women, dependents, officials, servants, workshops, estates, educational functions, and administrative responsibilities. Women of the royal family might possess property, participate in ritual, receive foreign correspondence, or exercise influence through kinship and court position. The institution was not a single room, and it was not merely private. It was an economic and political body attached to the crown. Children of the royal and elite household, when present in the record, belonged to systems of care, education, rank, and succession. Tutors, nurses, and attendants protected and instructed them. Some foreign princes may have been raised at the Egyptian court, where education also served diplomacy. Their presence reminds us that the palace was not only a workplace or stage, it was a community of households layered inside a state institution, though surviving texts reveal more about titles and property than about ordinary family life. Animals add another rhythm. Horses and chariot teams require fodder, water, grooming, harness maintenance, and trained handlers. Cattle, poultry, and other livestock support food, ritual, and prestige. At Amarna, areas near the central city included stables, wells, and service spaces that show how closely royal display depended on practical infrastructure. A ceremonial chariot gleaming in the sun is the final product of woodworkers, leather workers, metal workers, grooms, and animals fed every day, whether or not the king rides. The surprising truth is that the most powerful man in Egypt may be the least self-sufficient person in the palace. He does not grind his grain, carry his water, translate foreign tablets, maintain his sandals, repair his bed, or seal his storerooms. His authority rests on command, but his daily survival rests on trust. Thousands of hands perform small tasks correctly so that he can appear above ordinary necessity. As the morning advances, trays are prepared, rooms cleared, and officials summoned. The palace seems calm because disorder has been pushed into back corridors where it can be managed. Smoke rises from ovens, scribes bend over accounts, servants cross courtyards with baskets and jars. Somewhere, a missing delivery is being explained. Somewhere else, a steward checks a seal twice. The king may never see these moments, yet they support every gesture he is about to make. Before he can stand before gods, judges, envoys, or soldiers, the palace machine must feed the body, dress the office, and keep the illusion of effortless power alive. The palace machine has prepared the ruler, fed the household, opened storerooms, and arranged the first business of the day. Yet the king's authority cannot remain confined to offices, kitchens, and guarded halls. It must be carried into the sacred world. Across Egypt, temples are beginning their own mourning, and in official images the pharaoh stands at the center of every rite. He offers incense, raises vessels, presents food, pours water, and places Mat itself before the gods. The image is clear: the king sustains the divine order, and the gods in return sustain Egypt. Reality is more complicated. No single ruler can visit every sanctuary from the Delta to Nubia at dawn. The daily cult is performed by priests acting in his name. They are purified, dressed in clean linen, and admitted through carefully controlled spaces. They burn incense before entering the inner rooms. They break or remove seals from the shrine, open its doors, and reveal the cult statue concealed within. Light reaches the divine image. Hymns are recited, offerings are presented. The statue may be clothed, anointed, adorned, and given food and drink before the shrine is closed and sealed again. In some ritual descriptions, the officiant withdraws while erasing traces of his own presence, a gesture that restores the sanctuary to sacred isolation. The sequence is often described as the awakening of the god, but this must not be confused with the awakening of the pharaoh. The king rises in a palace as a mortal ruler preparing for government. The cult statue is ritually revealed in a sanctuary as the focus of divine presence. Official art connects the two because the ruler is the ideal priest of every temple, but the actual work is delegated. This distinction matters. It preserves the grandeur of kingship without pretending that one person physically performs thousands of ceremonies each morning. On an ordinary day, the pharaoh may never enter a major temple. The rites proceed without his visible presence, yet not without his authority. Offerings come from royal, temple, and agricultural estates. Priests hold offices authorized by the state. Inscriptions name the king as donor, builder, restorer, or beloved of the god. Even when absent, he is woven into the ritual grammar. His name on a wall allows his role to continue beyond his body and beyond his lifetime. On certain morning, however, the ruler may appear in person, a festival, dedication, royal visit, jubilee, or major political moment can bring him into a temple precinct. Then preparation becomes more elaborate. Processional routes are cleared, guards control access. Priests and officials gather according to rank. Sacred objects are prepared, and the king's clothing may become more formal. Gold, collars, staffs, crowns, and ceremonial sandals are selected for display. Though the exact combination remains uncertain, the purpose is not ornament for its own sake. Every item helps turn the ruler into a recognizable participant in cosmic order. Approaching the temple changes the atmosphere. Palace corridors give way to courtyards, pylons, columns, banners, and walls covered with scenes of divine exchange. The architecture narrows toward darkness. Outer spaces can hold crowds and officials, while inner spaces admit fewer people. The sanctuary lies deepest within, where light, sound, and access are tightly controlled. The king advances not as a tourist through a monument, but as the figure whom the building's entire symbolic program expects. Temple reliefs show him alone before the gods, even when attendants, priests, guards, and administrators must have surrounded the event. In the scene, the king is purified, welcomed, crowned, and embraced by divine beings. He offers wine, bread, incense, flowers, cloth, land, captives, or the small figure of Mat. The gods grant life, stability, dominion, and countless jubilees. These images are not neutral records. They present what the ceremony means rather than exactly how crowded, noisy, or awkward it may have been. The offering of Mat is especially revealing. Mat is not only a goddess or an abstract ideal, it is the condition that makes the world function correctly, truth against falsehood, justice against abuse, order against disruption. When the king presents Mat to a god, he symbolically gives the divine realm the very order he is responsible for maintaining. The act seems circular because it is the gods sustain creation, the king sustains their cults, and the people sustain the economic system that feeds both palace and temple. Each level claims to support the others. This religious responsibility places a burden on the ruler that cannot be separated from politics. A neglected temple can be described as a failure of kingship. A restored sanctuary becomes proof that order has returned. Royal inscriptions repeatedly celebrate building, renewal, endowment, and purification. They are not personal diaries, and they often exaggerate the uniqueness of the king's achievements, but they show what legitimacy required. A ruler must appear as the one who repairs what is broken, restores what is old, and drives away Isfet. The gods themselves are not distant abstractions. Their cult statues are housed, clothed, fed, and carried in processions. Their temples own fields, cattle, workshops, ships, and personnel. Religious life is therefore inseparable from administration. To honor a god is to manage grain, land, labor, and storage. A temple offering begins with harvests and tax systems long before it reaches a sanctuary table. The sacred moment rests on practical abundance. The food offered to the gods was not destroyed or abandoned. After ritual presentation, it could pass through systems of redistribution among priests and temple personnel. Sacred consumption therefore fed institutions as well as divine ones. A loaf placed before a statue could end its journey as a worker's ration, linking theology to appetite. Scholars still debate how much personal devotion individual pharaohs felt toward particular gods. Official texts speak in formulas shaped by institution and genre. A king may favor Amun, Aten, Ta, Re, or another deity for theological and political reasons. But the record rarely opens a private window into belief. What survives shows public responsibility more clearly than inner faith. The pharaoh must perform certainty even when his personal feelings remain unknowable. As incense rises, the ritual creates an image of control. The shrine opens, the god receives order. The king stands in the proper place, whether bodily present or represented through priestly action. Yet the very need to repeat the ceremony every day reveals fragility. Order is not assumed to endure on its own. It must be renewed, fed, spoken, sealed, and protected again and again. When the ruler turns from the sacred space, he carries that renewed authority back toward the court. Outside, officials wait with disputes, rewards, requests, and rival claims. The gods have been approached, but the world of people remains unsettled. The pharaoh now enters the place where divine kingship must survive the more dangerous test of human proximity. The sacred silence does not follow the king back into the audience hall. Here, power must be managed among living people, each carrying rank, ambition, memory, and expectation. The pharaoh enters a space designed to make hierarchy visible. Columns frame the approach. Painted floors and walls transform architecture into political argument. Foreign captives may appear beneath his feet, enemies reduced to images over which the ruler walks. Officials stand at measured distances. Guards control the edges. Heralds organize movement. No one simply wanders into the royal presence. Access to the king is itself a reward. The closer a person stands, the more clearly his status is displayed. Court titles reveal an elaborate system of service, mediation, and privilege. The great herald may announce individuals, transmit messages, and regulate who is admitted. Chamberlains, fan-bearers, royal scribes, military commanders, priests, governors, and envoys enter according to rules that are only partly preserved. Tomb scenes show people bowing deeply, kneeling, or lying prostrate before the ruler, but such images are idealized. They celebrate the owner's relationship with the crown and cannot be treated as a complete record of every audience. Even so, the scenes reveal the emotional geometry of court. The pharaoh is elevated, seated, framed, shaded, or positioned at a window above those receiving favor. Others approach from below, smaller in scale and carefully arranged. Distance becomes meaning. Posture becomes speech before any words are spoken. A man permitted to stand upright near the throne occupies a different world from one waiting outside in dust and heat. The court teaches everyone where they belong. Before entering, officials may undergo purification or remove sandals, depending on context. Clean linen, shaved skin, perfume, jewelry, staffs, and badges of office help identify rank. Clothing is not decorative excess. It tells the herald where a man belongs and tells rivals how the king currently values him. One official may carry the insignia of a provincial command. Another may display gold collars previously awarded for service. A foreign envoy arrives in distinctive clothing that marks him as useful, impressive, and outside the Egyptian order. The audience begins through announcement. Names, titles, offices, and reasons for appearance are spoken. A petitioner may be summarized before being admitted. A commander may present a report already examined by scribes. An envoy may bring gifts whose display has been arranged to produce maximum effect. The ruler does not face a random crowd. He confronts a sequence prepared by officials who understand that timing can alter judgment. Foreign embassies make the hall particularly theatrical. Tribute scenes from Egyptian tombs show delegations carrying metals, vessels, animals, timber, ivory, weapons, and luxury goods. These representations often collapse different events into an ideal image of the world bringing wealth to Egypt. Some foreigners shown as tribute bearers may actually have been diplomatic partners, merchants, or representatives within complex political relationships. Egyptian art prefers submission to negotiation, because submission better serves royal ideology. The reality behind the image could be less obedient. A ruler from another great kingdom might consider himself the pharaoh's equal and address him as a brother. His envoy may arrive not to kneel in helplessness, but to negotiate marriage, gifts, military cooperation, or prestige. Translators stand between languages, scribes record names and offerings, officials inspect objects and perhaps assess their quality. A beautiful vessel can flatter the king, but it can also imply that an equally valuable return gift is expected. Egyptian officials bring different pressures. A governor requests troops, a temple representative seeks land or labor. A military commander asks for promotion. A royal architect reports progress on a monument and quietly explains a shortage. A courtier hopes to be appointed over a rival. Each request is wrapped in deference, yet every request attempts to direct royal power toward a particular person or institution. The pharaoh listens from a position designed to appear immovable. He may ask questions, consult the vizier, issue an immediate command, postpone a decision, or order the matter investigated. No surviving transcript allows us to hear an ordinary audience unfold. Scholars still debate how much individual rulers spoke directly and how much business passed through senior officials. What survives in the record suggests both personal intervention and extensive delegation. The king is the source of authority, but the state cannot pause until he decides every minor issue. Scribes positioned nearby preserve selected commands, though the surviving record rarely captures hesitation, interruption, or disagreement. A spoken decision must become an order that can travel beyond the hall, acquire seals, reach an official, and be enforced. Authority therefore passes from voice to writing, then from writing into action, with opportunities for delay at every stage. The surprising weakness of the audience hall is that performance can obscure truth. An official who appears calm may be concealing failure. A petition polished by a skilled scribe may sound more urgent than a greater injustice described badly. A governor with access to the court can defend himself before distant accusers are heard. The ruler sees faces, gifts, posture, and prepared words, but not the villages, workshops, or borderlands behind them. This makes the herald and vizier crucial. They filter the hall before the hall reaches the king. They know old disputes, family connections, rival factions, and the reliability of reports. Their advice can protect the ruler from manipulation, but it can also become another form of manipulation. A pharaoh who distrusts every advisor cannot govern. A pharaoh who trusts too easily may be governed by them. Reward provides one way to control the court. At Amarna, the window of appearance turns royal favor into public spectacle. The king and queen appear above, while loyal officials receive collars and other gifts below. Gold descends from the royal level, making hierarchy visible and gratitude unavoidable. The recipient gains wealth and prestige, but he also becomes publicly marked as the king's man. Favor binds as surely as fear. The court watches every such choice. Who is summoned first? Who stands closest? Who receives gold? Who is ignored? Who leaves with a new title? And who is ordered to wait all become political information. Royal silence can humiliate. A smile can elevate. Even when official art freezes the ruler in perfect composure, those around him must read the smallest signs. By late morning, the hall has become a map of pressures converging on one chair. Priests seek support. Soldiers seek resources. Envoys seek advantage. And officials seek survival. The pharaoh's clothing still shines. Incense may still cling to him, and the language of divinity still surrounds the throne. Yet the work before him is intensely human. He must choose among people who all claim loyalty and rarely reveal the whole truth. The gods demand met in principle. The audience hall demands that he recognize it beneath ceremony, rivalry, and fear. The audience hall does not empty when ceremony ends. It changes character. Envoys withdraw. Rewarded officials display new collars, and those who came to be seen give way to those who came because something has gone wrong. A field boundary has been moved. Grain has vanished from an estate. A worker has been beaten by an overseer. A temple disputes a tax demand. A family contests an inheritance. A governor accuses a rival of corruption. Beneath the throne, the language of divine order must become decisions about property, obligation, punishment, and repair. Egyptian kingship claims that the pharaoh establishes justice, but that does not mean he personally hears every complaint in the two lands. The vizier, local officials, councils, temple administrators, and appointed judges handle much of the legal work. Royal decrees define authority, protect institutions, assign land, remit taxes, or threaten penalties. The king stands at the summit of the system, yet daily judgment is distributed through many offices. Scholars still debate how often ordinary petitioners reach the ruler directly, because surviving texts preserve exceptional cases more readily than routine procedure. Justice in Egypt is not organized through a single surviving law code comparable to those known from Mesopotamia. Instead, legal practice emerges from decrees, contracts, court records, letters, petitions, administrative documents, and moral texts. Mat provides the ideal language truth, balance, rightful conduct, and the proper arrangement of society. yet Met is broad enough to support different outcomes. Every party in a dispute may claim that order stands on his side. A petitioner entering the royal presence must therefore do more than tell a story. The case must be made legible to administration. Names, titles, witnesses, boundaries, quantities, dates, and previous decisions matter. Scribes turn memory into a record. Seals, receipts, jar labels, and account entries may carry more weight than eloquence. A person unable to produce documentation can still seek justice, but the state naturally trusts forms it can archive. Some petitions probably reach the king only after lower authorities fail, delay, or appear compromised. The tale of the eloquent peasant, though literary rather than a transcript, imagines a wronged man repeatedly appealing for justice and using extraordinary speech to expose official failure. Its artistry should not be mistaken for courtroom reporting, yet it reveals an Egyptian fascination with the ruler and his representatives as guardians against abuse. The ideal judge listens beyond status. The real system, like all systems, may not. Even a genuine grievance could disappear if an official delayed it, a scribe framed it poorly, or a powerful household blocked its path. The pharaoh may receive a summary from the vizier. One side claims an estate failed to deliver grain. The estate claims flood damage reduced the harvest. Scribes present older accounts. Witnesses disagree about whether a storage seal was intact. The king can order an inspection, appoint commissioners, demand repayment, or postpone judgment until additional evidence arrives. A dramatic immediate verdict makes good storytelling, but administrative delay is often more plausible. Power does not always strike like a sword. Often it sends another document. Tax disputes reveal the tension between sacred kingship and material survival. Grain supports officials, workers, temples, expeditions, garrisons, and the palace itself. If assessments are too low, institutions suffer shortages. If they are too high, households and estates may be pushed beyond endurance. Flood levels vary, harvests fail unevenly, and local administrators may manipulate figures. A ruler praised as provider must also be collector, and the two roles can conflict. Temple property creates further complexity. Temples possess fields, cattle, workshops, boats, personnel, and storerooms. Royal grants may exempt them from certain demands or protect their assets. Later, kings can renew, alter, or ignore earlier privileges. Priests present temple wealth as belonging to the gods, while the crown may view it as part of the broader political economy. A dispute over land is therefore never only economic. It can become a question of whether the pharaoh is honoring divine order or allowing one institution to grow too powerful. Punishment appears in Egyptian records, but official art often simplifies it into scenes of the king smiting enemies. Real judicial action is less visually neat. Penalties could include loss of office, confiscation, forced labour, beatings, mutilation in some periods, exile, or death for serious crimes. The evidence varies by time and context, and no single list applies universally. In a responsible reconstruction, punishment should not be treated as theatrical cruelty. It is part of a system that seeks deterrence, restitution, political control, and the restoration of authority, though it could also be harsh, unequal, and vulnerable to abuse. The ruler must judge officials differently from ordinary subjects because elite misconduct threatens the state from within. A corrupt administrator can steal grain from thousands. A commander can conceal losses. A palace official can manipulate access. Trials connected to the conspiracy against Ramesses III show a state investigating people close to the royal household, including officials and military personnel. The proceedings also revealed danger within the judicial process itself. Some judges were accused of improper contact with defendants. Even those appointed to protect order could compromise it. Reward balances punishment. A loyal official may receive gold, land, promotion, titles, or public praise. A community may gain tax relief after hardship. A temple may receive endowment. Mercy can strengthen legitimacy, but it must be distributed carefully. Too much leniency appears weak. Too much severity breeds resentment and fear. The pharaoh's official image offers no sign of uncertainty, yet actual judgment requires choosing between incomplete accounts and competing risks. There is also the question of whose voice never enters the hall. Many people leave no petitions, either because they lack access, because their disputes are settled locally, or because the records have vanished. Archaeology reveals crowded settlements, worn bodies, repaired tools, ration shortages, and domestic hardship that royal inscriptions rarely mention. The state's written voice is strongest where administration is strongest. Silence does not prove contentment. As cases accumulate, the throne becomes less a seat of majesty than a point of compression. Grain, land, labour, temple privilege, official rivalry, and personal grievance are reduced to decisions that must travel outward and become real. The pharaoh is expected to recognize truth beneath performance, just as he was expected to recognize loyalty beneath ceremony. Yet no crown grants perfect knowledge. By the time the final petitioner withdraws, the hall may appear orderly again. Scribes gather documents. Messengers receive instructions. Guards reopen a path. Somewhere beyond the palace, one decision will restore property, another will deepen resentment, and a third will be delayed until its urgency fades. The king has performed justice, but Mat is not secured forever. It must be attempted again with the next complaint, the next shortage, and the next official who insists that disorder belongs to someone else. Beyond the audience hall, the world does not become quieter, it becomes larger. The disputes of estates and officials belong to Egypt's internal order, but the next reports arrive from places where the pharaoh's authority is less certain: desert roads, river fortresses, Levantine cities, Nubian mining zones, and foreign courts that recognize Egypt's power without submitting to it completely. Every message carries distance inside it, and distance creates room for delay, exaggeration, and betrayal. The Amarna Letters offer the clearest surviving window into this dangerous diplomatic world. Written mostly in Akkadian cuneiform during the 14th century BCE, they preserve the voices of rulers who call the pharaoh brother, lord, or son according to their rank and political need. Great kings of Babylonia, Mitanni, Assyria, and Hatti speak as near equals. Smaller rulers in Canaan and Syria lower themselves rhetorically, calling themselves servants and dust beneath the king's feet. Yet their humility does not prevent accusation, bargaining, complaint, or manipulation. A messenger or interpreter reads aloud. One city ruler insists that enemies are closing in. Another claims the first ruler is lying. A third complains that Egyptian troops have not arrived. The same names recur in conflicting accounts, each sender arranging events to make himself indispensable. The pharaoh hears a region not as a map with clear borders, but as a chorus of competing warnings. No single explanation fully accounts for every conflict because the surviving letters are fragments of arguments. not a complete archive of events. Some letters ask for soldiers, others request archers, chariots, or direct intervention against local rivals. The language can sound desperate, but urgency itself is a political tool. A vassal who presents every dispute as rebellion hopes to transform a private struggle into an Egyptian priority. If the king sends troops, one local faction gains power. If he refuses, the sender may claim abandonment. Even silence becomes a decision. The pharaoh must also think about the cost of response. Troops need grain, water, weapons, animals, and transport. Chariots require horses, skilled crews, spare parts, and routes suitable for movement. A force dispatched north cannot be used elsewhere. A commander sent to restore order may create new rivalries or overstate his success. Royal inscriptions later compress campaigns into triumph, but before victory there is calculation, delay, and uncertainty. To the south, Nubia presents a different combination of wealth and danger. Egyptian control over forts, settlements, river routes, and mining regions supports access to gold, cattle, labour, and trade. Yet control is never automatic. Garrisons must be supplied, officials must remain loyal. Desert expeditions depend on water sources known to guides and administrators. A failure of logistics can be as dangerous as open revolt. Gold reaches the palace only because fragile routes remain functioning across hostile terrain. The letters from great foreign kings carry another kind of threat, the threat of status. They negotiate marriages, gifts, prestige, and the delicate fiction of equality among rulers. A Babylonian or Mitannian king may address the pharaoh as brother, then complain that a shipment of gold is insufficient. He may insist that gold is as common as dust in Egypt and therefore should be sent in greater quantity. Such claims flatter Egyptian abundance while pressuring the court to prove it. Gift exchange is not generosity without calculation. A chariot, horse team, vessel, lapis lazuli object, or quantity of gold enters a system of expectation. Too small a gift can signal insult. Too great a gift may imply dependence or attempt to purchase influence. Marriage negotiations are equally sensitive. Foreign princesses can be sent to Egypt, but Egyptian royal daughters appear not to have been offered abroad in the same way. At least according to the surviving correspondence, the imbalance expresses status, and foreign rulers notice it. Translators and scribes become vital in this environment. A poorly rendered phrase can alter tone. A title translated too weakly may insult. A formula that sounds obedient in one language may carry a sharper meaning in another. The king depends on specialists who understand not only words but court conventions. Their work is largely invisible, yet diplomacy can fail through a nuance that never reaches the royal ear. There are also physical dangers in transmission. Messengers travel through contested territory. Tablets can be delayed, damaged, intercepted, or separated from their escorts. A report may describe conditions weeks or months old by the time it is heard. The pharaoh may respond to a crisis that has already changed. In this sense, royal power is always chasing the present. Frontier reports add practical details that diplomatic letters often omit. Fort commanders monitor movement, supplies, wells, livestock, and local alliances. Desert routes must be watched against raiding, smuggling, or unauthorized passage. Along the Mediterranean and in the eastern delta, changing populations and military pressures can alter security. Later Egyptian records describe waves of conflict involving groups often called the Sea Peoples. but those events belong to particular periods and should not be projected onto every reign. Danger changes shape across centuries. The ruler must therefore distinguish between a temporary disturbance and a threat to the larger order. A local quarrel may remain local. A failed harvest may produce migration. A rival kingdom's diplomatic insult may conceal military preparation, or it may be nothing more than performance. Intelligence is incomplete, and every advisor brings his own interests. Military officials may favor action. Treasury officials may warn of cost. Diplomats may recommend patience. Priests may interpret events through divine favor and ritual obligation. The king's image allows no uncertainty. On temple walls, he seizes enemies by the hair, raises a weapon, and defeats whole nations in a single gesture. In the audience chamber, however, he must choose among imperfect options. Send troops and risk overextension. Hold them back and risk losing influence. Send more gold and preserve an alliance. Refuse and defend prestige. Accept a marriage and gain connection. Delay and invite resentment. Fear here is not simply fear of invasion. It is fear of misreading the world. A ruler can survive an enemy he recognizes, but a false report can direct strength toward the wrong place. A flattering envoy may conceal hostility. A loyal governor may already be losing control. A quiet frontier may only be quiet because no messenger has arrived. As the reports conclude, scribes prepare replies. Clay will be shaped, words impressed, seals applied, and messengers dispatched into the same uncertain distance from which the warnings came. The Pharaoh's decision leaves the palace as language, carrying authority across roads he cannot see. By the time the message reaches its destination, the world may have changed again, and the next letter may already be on its way. Between command and consequence lies a corridor of time in which no crown, army, or God can guarantee that obedience will survive distance. War is never confined to the battlefield. Long before a chariot wheel cuts through dust or an archer releases a bowstring, conflict enters the palace as lists, requests, shortages, and names. Horses must be fed, axles must be repaired, bronze must be cast, leather must be cut, stitched, and replaced. Fortresses need grain, water, weapons, scribes, and commanders whose loyalty is as important as their courage. The pharaoh may be shown in art charging alone into enemy ranks, but the army that makes such an image possible is an immense machine of people, animals, roads, workshops, and calculation. By the New Kingdom, the chariot has become one of the most visible symbols of royal warfare, light, fast, and demanding great skill. It carries a driver and an archer across open ground. The king is often shown standing within one, bow drawn, reins controlled, enemies collapsing before him. These scenes proclaim mastery, speed, and divine favor. They do not record the confusion of real combat, terrain, weather, frightened horses, broken equipment, missed signals, and exhausted crews do not fit easily into monumental relief. A royal chariot depends on imported and local materials. Wood must be selected for strength and flexibility. Leather bindings absorb stress. Metal fittings reinforce vulnerable points. Wheels require precision. Horses need breeding, training, grooming, fodder, and experienced handlers. A damaged harness can remove a vehicle from service as effectively as an enemy weapon. The glamour of the chariot conceals a maintenance culture that begins in stables and workshops, not on the battlefield. Military reports reach the king through officers who know that failure can destroy careers. A commander may emphasize hardship to excuse delay, praise his own judgment, or blame unreliable subordinates. Another may minimize losses until evidence forces a fuller account. Royal inscriptions often transform uncertainty into victory, but the documents behind campaigns must have contained far more hesitation. We rarely possess the complete sequence from first warning to final decision. What survives in the record suggests that warfare was planned through imperfect intelligence and administered through written orders whose execution depended on people beyond the king's sight. The pharaoh must decide whether to lead in person. Personal command can strengthen legitimacy, intimidate rivals, and allow the ruler to claim direct victory. It also exposes the royal body to accident, capture, disease, and betrayal. A king killed far from Egypt does not merely remove a commander. He creates a succession crisis, interrupts ritual continuity, and invites enemies to test the state. Even a minor wound can become politically dangerous if the court suspects weakness. When the king does remain behind, he must trust generals whose success may make them powerful. An army loyal to its commander can become a political force. A victorious officer returns with prestige, followers, gifts, and knowledge of the state's vulnerabilities. The crown needs talented commanders, but talent must not become independence. Promotion, marriage, land grants, gold rewards, and court appointments can bind military elites to the palace. Surveillance and rivalry can keep them divided. No single method guarantees loyalty. The army itself is not a single unchanging institution. Its organization, recruitment, and ethnic composition develop across periods. Egyptian troops serve alongside Nubian archers, chariot units, foreign auxiliaries, and groups incorporated through alliance, settlement, or conquest. Later sources sometimes label foreigners collectively in ways that obscure their different origins and roles. A responsible reconstruction must avoid imagining every non-Egyptian soldier as a mercenary, or every campaign as a clash between fixed peoples. Frontiers create mixtures as often as divisions. Fortresses make that complexity visible, along the Nile in Nubia and across strategic routes in the north and east. Fortified sites control movement, protect supplies, store grain, and project authority. Their walls matter, but so do wells, docks, bakeries, animal enclosures, and administrative rooms. A fortress without food or water is only a trapped garrison. A commander can hold stone walls and still lose control of the region if supply boats fail to arrive. This logistical truth shapes every royal decision. To send an army north means grain must move with it or be collected along the route. To campaign in desert country means water points must be known and secured. To move chariots means roads and terrain must allow wheels to survive. To keep horses alive means carrying or obtaining fodder in quantities that compete with human needs. War consumes the same agricultural surplus that supports temples, palace workers, and construction projects. A victory can enrich the state, but a long campaign can drain it. The pharaoh is also judged by how war is remembered. Temple walls present conquest as ritual. The king defeats foreign enemies just as the sun god defeats the forces threatening creation. Bound captives appear beneath sandals, thrones, and palace floors. Lists of conquered places cover monuments, sometimes preserving genuine geographical information, and sometimes repeating traditional enemies for symbolic completeness. Military action becomes another form of maintaining mat. Yet propaganda can outlive the events it reshapes. The Battle of Kadesh under Ramesses II is known partly through extensive royal accounts celebrating the king's courage when his forces were caught in danger. Hittite records and the later treaty reveal a more complicated strategic outcome than the Egyptian presentation of overwhelming triumph. The event demonstrates how royal memory works. Vulnerability is admitted only so that the king's rescue by divine favor appears greater. Fear is converted into heroic isolation, and uncertainty into ordained success. The ruler hearing a military briefing knows that monuments will demand clarity later. Either the campaign will be framed as victory, or silence will close around it. There is little room in official art for costly stalemate, intelligence failure, or unnecessary loss. This pressure may shape decisions before the army moves. Prestige can become a strategic burden. A king who has promised dominance cannot easily admit that patience is wiser. Inside the palace, maps may not resemble modern maps. Knowledge is carried through route lists, scribal records, oral reports, tribute scenes, and the experience of messengers and officers. Distance is understood through travel time, water sources, forts, rivers, and political relationships. The king does not look down upon a complete coloured image of empire. He assembles space from fragments, just as he assembles truth from letters. By midday, the military world has filled the room without a single weapon being drawn. Officials debate troops, supplies, horses, fortresses, foreign rulers, and the reliability of commanders. The king may touch a bow later for ceremony or inspection, but the true weight of war already rests in decisions written on tablets and papyrus. Behind every heroic image waits the possibility of broken logistics, divided loyalty, and a body that remains mortal no matter how large it is carved on stone. Victory begins in storerooms. Defeat may begin with an empty jar beside the road. By the time the sun stands higher above the river, the pharaoh has heard of distant borders, rival kings, supply routes, and military risk. Yet the most decisive force governing Egypt is closer than any foreign army. It moves beside the palace, carrying boats, silt, fish, reeds, taxes, and rumour. The Nile does not merely cross the kingdom, it determines the rhythm by which the kingdom can exist. Every royal promise rests upon water. Temples must be supplied, workers fed, garrisons receive grain, and mining expeditions be provisioned. None of these obligations can be separated from the flood, the fields, and the network of canals and basins that distribute water across cultivated land. A pharaoh may be praised as the one who makes Egypt flourish, but he cannot command the river as he commands a scribe. He can organize labor around it, build embankments, maintain channels, store surplus, and perform rituals that link his rule to abundance. He cannot guarantee that every season will behave as royal ideology expects. The annual inundation is often imagined as a perfectly regular gift, arriving at the right height and leaving behind fertile soil. In reality, variation matters. A flood that is too low can reduce cultivation and threaten harvests. A flood that is too high can damage settlements, fields, and infrastructure. Local conditions differ, and one region may suffer while another remains productive. The evidence remains incomplete for many specific years, but administrative records, inscriptions, and environmental studies show that the river's behavior had consequences reaching from village households to the throne. Measurements of the Nile were therefore political information. Later Nilometers provide clear examples of formal observation, and earlier officials also monitored water levels through practical experience, markers, and regional reporting. A number means little by itself unless translated into expectations how much land may be watered, how much grain collected, whether transport routes remain open, and whether emergency measures are needed. The king may never stand beside the measuring point personally. Yet somewhere in his administration, men watch the river and turn its rise into figures shaping taxation, storage, and labour. This is where royal abundance becomes difficult. Tax assessments are not simply a matter of taking a fixed share from a predictable harvest. Fields differ in quality. Flood damage can be uneven. Boundaries may shift when channels move or markers disappear. Local officials may exaggerate loss, conceal surplus, or protect favoured estates. Temple lands may claim privileges. A central order that seems reasonable in the palace can become harsh when applied to a village that has lost part of its crop. Mat demands balance, but balance is harder to measure than grain. Scribes play a decisive role in that conversion. They record land, yields, deliveries, and arrears. They accompany inspections, measure fields, note damaged boundaries, and compare present obligations with earlier records. Their documents create the administrative landscape the king governs. Yet writing does not remove uncertainty. A figure can be copied incorrectly. An official can alter an account. A delayed report can make conditions appear better than they are. The pharaoh receives the Nile through numbers, just as he receives foreign threats through letters. The river is also Egypt's great road. Stone, grain, timber, cattle, officials, soldiers, and ceremonial objects move by boat more efficiently than overland transport could allow. The direction of travel changes with current and wind. Northward movement can follow the river's flow, while southward travel may use prevailing winds and sails. This combination helps bind distant regions into one state, but only if boats, crews, landing places, and schedules function. A damaged vessel, low water, or blocked channel can delay a royal project as surely as political resistance. Ports and artificial basins connect palaces to this watery system. Near Amenhotep III's complex at Malqata, the vast Birket Habu may have supported ceremonial and practical movement associated with the royal residence and jubilee festivals, though scholars still debate aspects of its construction and use. At Amarna, the central city stood close to routes connecting palace, temples, administrative offices, and the Nile. The royal household may appear enclosed behind walls, but it depends constantly on boats arriving from beyond them. The flood also organizes labor. When agricultural work changes with the season, the state can mobilize people for construction, transport, quarrying, or other obligations. This does not mean every monumental worker is an enslaved captive. Egyptian labor included skilled specialists, permanent personnel, rotating teams, corvée obligations, and many forms of dependence that changed across time. The ruler's ability to move labor reflects administrative reach, but each project competes with local needs and other state demands. A temple pylon, palace extension, or royal tomb requires more than a command. Stone must be quarried and transported. Mud bricks must be moulded and dried. Timber, rope, plaster, pigment, food, tools, and housing must be provided. Workers must be organized into crews and supplied over long periods. A king who announces a monument is also announcing a claim on future harvests. If the Nile fails, unfinished walls become evidence that divine ambition has collided with material limits. Food security therefore depends on storage as much as production. Granaries can protect surplus across seasons, support institutions, and provide resilience when harvests decline. They can also attract theft, pests, spoilage, and corruption. Grain is counted because grain is power. It pays workers, feeds armies, sustains temples, and allows the palace to respond to shortage. A full granary makes the ruler appear generous. An empty one exposes how quickly sacred authority can become vulnerable to hunger. The king's fear of disorder is most concrete here. Isfet is not only a serpent attacking the solar boat or a foreign enemy beneath royal sandals. It can be a failed canal, a disputed field, a boat that never arrives, or a granary whose accounts hide emptiness. Such failures are less dramatic than invasion, but they can erode confidence throughout the kingdom. A ruler who cannot feed workers or support temples risks more than administrative embarrassment. He risks appearing unable to maintain the very order that justifies his throne. By afternoon, reports from the river may lie beside military tablets and court petitions. They speak in different languages of the same problem. Power depends on systems the king does not fully control. He can reward, punish, command, and pray. He can send inspectors, release grain, repair canals, and revise demands. He can order inscriptions declaring prosperity, but beyond the palace, water continues to rise or fall according to forces no decree can silence. The Nile gives Egypt continuity, yet it also teaches every pharaoh the limits of rule. The kingdom may call him Lord of the Two Lands, image of the gods, and guardian of Mat. Still, beneath every crown waits the same ancient uncertainty whether the river will return in the measure the land requires. The river has reminded the king that nature cannot be ordered by decree. The court reminds him of something more intimate: people cannot be ordered either. Gold, ceremony, guards, and divine titles create distance between the pharaoh and everyone around him. Yet the danger closest to the throne often comes from those permitted to cross that distance. A foreign army must approach through frontiers. A conspirator may already know the palace corridors. No surviving source allows us to enter the mind of an ordinary pharaoh and measure his fear. Royal inscriptions do not confess anxiety. They present certainty. The king is victorious, beloved, chosen, protected, and eternally renewed. Even scenes of crisis are arranged so that divine favor becomes unmistakable. Yet beneath this public language, Egyptian history preserves enough evidence of assassination, contested succession, illness, and court intrigue to show that royal security was never absolute. The evidence remains incomplete, but it is too substantial to dismiss. The clearest case comes from the reign of Ramesses III. A judicial papyrus records proceedings against people involved in a conspiracy connected with the royal household. The plot sought to place Pentaweret, a son of Queen Taye, on the throne instead of the designated successor. Those accused included officials, military personnel, members of the palace establishment, and ritual specialists. The document avoids speaking plainly about the king's death, using guarded language shaped by legal and religious caution. For years, scholars debated whether the conspiracy had succeeded. Modern examination of the mummy changed that discussion. CT imaging revealed a deep cut across the throat, severe enough to have caused rapid death. An amulet had been placed within the wound during embalming, perhaps as a protective gesture. The injury strongly supports the conclusion that Ramesses III was assassinated. The image is difficult to reconcile with the monumental language of invulnerability. A ruler shown smiting enemies and defending Egypt may have died because danger reached him inside the system built to protect him. The conspiracy also exposes the complexity of the so-called royal harem. It was not simply a secluded collection of wives and concubines. It was an institution with households, officials, servants, property, workshops, and political relationships. Such a place could nurture royal children and support court life, but it could also become a centre of succession politics. A prince's claim depended not only on his birth, but on the position of his mother, the support of officials, and the ability of factions to act before a rival secured the crown. Succession was one of the most persistent pressures of kingship. Ideally, the next ruler was presented as the rightful heir, chosen by the gods and embraced by the reigning king. In practice, royal families could contain many sons, daughters, wives, half-siblings, and powerful relatives. Death might come unexpectedly. An intended heir might die before his father. A younger prince might gain military support. A queen mother might protect the interests of her child. Officials could calculate which claimant offered the safest future. The smooth sequence carved on temple walls may conceal years of uncertainty. The teaching of Amenemhat gives this anxiety a literary voice. In the composition, the dead king Amenemhat warns his son not to trust too easily. He recalls being attacked at night when he was without protection, surrounded by people who should have been loyal. The text survives in copies made after the king's lifetime and cannot be treated as a literal final statement. Scholars still debate how closely it reflects an actual assassination. Yet its lesson is unmistakable: proximity does not guarantee fidelity, and the ruler who trusts completely may be most exposed. Illness creates another kind of insecurity. The pharaoh can command physicians, medicines, oils, amulets, prayers, and skilled attendants, but the royal body remains vulnerable to infection, pain, injury, and age. Mummies reveal dental disease, arthritis, trauma, and other conditions among elites. Medical texts show sophisticated observation alongside remedies shaped by magic and religion. The king's treatment may combine practical care with protective ritual, because disease belongs simultaneously to the body and to the supernatural landscape. This vulnerability is easy to exaggerate. Popular accounts sometimes claim that Akhenaten city suffered a catastrophic epidemic that devastated the royal family. Recent bioarchaeological research has challenged that picture, finding little convincing evidence for a mass mortality crisis at Akhenaten. Disease was certainly a constant risk, but the current evidence does not justify placing the pharaoh inside a proven plague every morning. The more responsible image is one of uncertainty. Illness could strike. Physicians could treat, and no one could know whether ritual, medicine, and privilege would be enough. Divine displeasure added a further layer: a poor flood, military setback, sudden death, or failed project might be interpreted not merely as bad fortune but as a sign that order had been disturbed. The king's duty was to maintain Mat, restore temples, defeat rebellion, and sustain the gods. If events turned against Egypt, critics could ask whether that duty had failed. Official texts usually answer by blaming enemies, disorder, or impiety, then presenting the ruler as the one who repairs the damage. The repetition of this formula suggests how necessary reassurance was. Dreams and omens also belong to this world of uncertainty. The Ramesside dream book classifies certain dreams as favourable or unfavourable, while the dream stealer of Thutmose IV presents a royal encounter with the great Sphinx as a promise of kingship. Such texts do not prove that every pharaoh consulted dream interpreters each morning, and the stela is best understood as a statement legitimizing rule. Still, they show that unusual experiences could be read as messages about destiny, danger, or divine intention. Fear inside the court therefore had many forms. It could be fear of a blade, a poisoned alliance, a rival heir, a failed harvest, an unexplained illness, or a sign that the gods had withdrawn favor. It could also be fear of appearing afraid. The pharaoh's authority depended on composure. Courtiers watched his face, posture, health, and decisions. A rumor of weakness could travel faster than an official denial. This is why the golden image had to be maintained carefully. Jewelry, ceremony, controlled access, and public reward did not prove that the ruler felt secure. They helped produce security by persuading others that the center still held. The court needed to see confidence because confidence itself could discourage challenge. Yet every layer of protection also revealed the possibility of breach. As the afternoon light shifts across the palace, guards remain at their posts, servants continue their work, and officials speak in lowered voices. The king may appear calm beneath linen and gold, but calm is part of the office. Behind it lies the knowledge that danger is not always visible. Loyalty is never automatic, and even a divine throne rests upon a human body that can be reached. As afternoon softens, the palace does not suddenly become private. Royal life has no clean boundary between public duty and personal time. Officials continue to arrive. Scribes still carry documents. Servants move through corridors with lamps, food, water, linen, and messages. Yet the tone changes. The audience hall may fall quieter. Formal audiences become less frequent, and the ruler withdraws towards spaces where fewer people may follow. What survives from these hours is fragmentary. Palaces preserve walls more readily than habits, and official art favours ceremony over fatigue. No complete evening menu survives for a known ruler. Bread and beer remain basic foods throughout Egyptian society, while the royal household has access to meat, poultry, fish, vegetables, fruit, wine, oils, honey, and cakes. Banquet scenes show crowded tables, perfumed guests, musicians, and servants offering cups. These images reveal abundance and elite pleasure, but they do not prove every evening ended in a feast. A ruler who has spent the day hearing petitions, military reports, and diplomatic complaints may eat in a smaller setting, with selected relatives or attendants, while scribes remain near enough to interrupt. Food itself continues to express rank. Fine wine may come from named estates, sealed in jars and labelled with year, origin, and responsible official. Meat requires animals raised, slaughtered, inspected, cooked, and carried through service rooms that royal images rarely show. Fruit may have travelled from orchards attached to estates or temples. Even a quiet meal depends on the palace machine that began working before dawn. Every dish reaches the king through labour, accounting, storage, and transport. Family presence is possible, though it must be reconstructed carefully. Royal wives, daughters, sons, mothers, and other relatives could hold visible ceremonial and political roles. At Amarna, the royal family appears together with unusual frequency in official art, receiving the rays of the Aten, riding in chariots, rewarding officials, or participating in worship. These scenes create an impression of intimacy, but they are also ideological. They present the family as the sacred center of a new religious order. they cannot be read as unfiltered glimpses of private affection. Elsewhere, royal women may appear beside the king in temple scenes, festivals, or funerary monuments. Great royal wives can possess estates, patronage, ritual titles, and influence at court. Queen mothers may become important during succession. The institution often called the harem includes residences, servants, administrators, workshops, and educational functions rather than a single secluded chamber. Evening life within the palace therefore involves overlapping households, each with its own rank and guarded access. Children of the royal family, when represented, are usually shown within protective and ceremonial settings. Nurses, tutors, attendants, and officials support their upbringing. Their education prepares some for ritual office, administration, diplomacy, or succession. The details of ordinary interaction remain largely unknown. We may imagine shared meals or instruction, but the record does not allow us to invent conversations or emotions. What survives suggests a family shaped by political expectation. Entertainment may follow: musicians, singers, dancers, storytellers, board games, hunting memories, and conversation all belong to elite life. Harps, lutes, flutes, percussion instruments, and clappers appear in art and archaeology. Music can accompany banquets, religious observance, mourning, celebration, and private relaxation. Yet even entertainment at court is rarely free from hierarchy. Performers are selected, guests are ranked, and the king's response is watched. A pleasant evening may still be a performance of composure. The ruler might inspect objects brought from workshops or foreign lands. A carved vessel, rare stone, chariot fitting, piece of furniture, or newly completed jewellery could be presented for approval. Artisans do not necessarily stand before him directly. Overseers may speak for the workshop. A gift from abroad can be admired for beauty while judged for diplomatic meaning. Nothing entering the royal apartments is neutral. Medical care may also belong to these quieter hours. Physicians, specialists, and ritual practitioners served elite households, and Egyptian medicine combined observation with remedies involving plants, minerals, oils, bandaging, incantation, and protective objects. A king suffering from pain, digestive illness, dental problems, eye irritation, fatigue, or an old injury may receive treatment away from court. Mummies remind us that elite bodies endured arthritis, damaged teeth, fractures, and disease despite access to care. No surviving record tells us whether a particular pharaoh complained of pain after an audience or required assistance removing ceremonial clothing. Official images suppress such details because royal ideology depends on bodily perfection. The king's private rooms may therefore be where the difference between image and flesh becomes visible. Heavy collars are removed, sandals are set aside, cosmetics may be cleaned, linen marked by heat and dust is replaced. The face seen by fewer people can relax, though attendants remain present. Rest does not mean isolation. Servants control lamps, shutters, fans, water, and bedding. Guards maintain their positions. A senior official may request urgent access. News from a frontier cannot always wait until morning. A physician may be summoned. A priest may bring a ritual concern. The king's privacy is conditional, protected yet penetrable by necessity. The architecture reinforces this layered seclusion. At Malqata and Amarna, private suites are approached through sequences of halls, courts, and doorways. Painted walls may evoke marshes, birds, plants, and captured enemies. Such imagery surrounds the ruler with abundance and domination, even when he withdraws from formal duty. The palace does not let him forget the office. Its rooms repeat the story of kingship. Perhaps there is time for a game such as Senate, though direct evidence for a specific royal evening remains absent. Perhaps music drifts through a smaller chamber. Perhaps a cup of wine is poured. Each possibility is plausible, but none should be mistaken for documented routine. Scholars still debate how much ordinary palace life can be reconstructed from elite tomb scenes, because those scenes often represent ideal celebration rather than daily habit. The deepest uncertainty concerns emotion. Did the king feel relief when the hall emptied, or did silence make danger more noticeable? Did family offer companionship, or did succession politics follow him into private rooms? Did the weight of ritual fade when he removed a crown, or become heavier because he knew it must be put on again at dawn? The evidence cannot answer. It can only place a mortal person inside rooms designed for a sacred office. As evening settles over the Nile, the palace becomes quieter but not still. Kitchens clean their vessels. Scribes store tablets and rolls. Guards receive new instructions. Lamps are lit one by one. Beyond the walls, boats tie up along the river and households prepare for night. Inside the royal apartments, the pharaoh eats, listens, rests, receives care, or sits among a chosen few. The day has narrowed around him, but it has not released him. Even in privacy, he remains surrounded by service, expectation, and watchfulness. Night does not erase the palace, it rearranges it. Courtyards that carried officials through the day now hold cooler air, deeper shadows. Lamps replace sunlight, narrowing vision to small circles of flame. Servants lower shutters, tend wicks, carry water, and remove the last vessels from evening rooms. Doors that stood open for ceremony are closed, barred, or watched. The king has withdrawn, but the state has not gone to sleep. The royal bedchamber lies within layers of controlled access. Outer guards monitor approaches to the private apartments. Inner attendants know which doors may be opened, who may enter, and under what conditions. Only urgent visitors are admitted. Architecture becomes part of the security system, using courts, corridors, thresholds, and restricted suites to slow movement toward the ruler. At Malqata and Amarna, surviving plans show how royal spaces could be separated from public areas, though the precise use of many rooms remains debated. The guards are not ornamental figures standing motionless until dawn. They must remain alert through hours when fatigue makes every sound uncertain. A footstep may belong to a servant carrying oil. A door may move because of wind. A messenger may arrive from a river landing with news that cannot wait. Watchmen must distinguish routine from danger without creating panic. Their task is harder because anyone close enough to threaten the king may already possess legitimate access. Lamps require constant attention. Oil must be supplied, wicks trimmed, soot managed, and flame kept away from textiles, timber, reed mats, and painted surfaces. Much of the palace is built from mud brick, but its interiors contain combustible materials. Fire is useful and dangerous. Too little light creates concealment. Too much creates smoke and risk. The pharaoh's bed, like other elite beds, may be raised on legs and made from wood, with woven support, linen, cushions, and protective decoration. No surviving arrangement can be assigned confidently to every ruler. What matters is that sleep is surrounded by objects carrying practical and symbolic force, amulets, divine images, inscriptions, and ritual words may protect the body. Headrests could bear images intended to repel threatening beings. Sleep was not merely rest. It was entry into a dangerous interval when awareness weakened, and dreams could carry meaning. Egyptian religious thought did not treat night as empty time. The sun god Re travels through the underworld, confronting forces that seek to halt renewal. The hours of darkness are mapped in funerary texts as stages of passage, danger, judgment, and regeneration. Their wider symbolism shaped how Egyptians understood cosmic night. Darkness becomes the period in which order must survive unseen attacks before sunrise proves that creation has continued. The living pharaoh is not literally identified with every scene of the solar underworld during an ordinary night, but his kingship is linked to the same cycle. By day he appears as defender of Mat. By night, priests and ritual specialists continue protective work that helps ensure the world remains ordered until dawn. Temple services, astronomical observations, hymns, and recitations may take place according to local schedules across Egypt. The king's name remains active in rituals he never witnesses. Protective magic belongs within the system, not outside it. Egyptians did not divide religion, medicine, and magic into neat modern categories. Spoken formulas, amulets, divine names, images, and practical precautions could work together. A guard at a door and a spell against hostile forces are not competing explanations. Both address different forms of danger. The conspiracy against Rameses III even involved ritual specialists accused of using wax figures and magical texts to weaken guards. Whether every accusation reflects actual practice is difficult to know, but the records show that magic could be treated as a political weapon. This makes the night watch more than a military duty. The king must be protected from intruders, illness, nightmares, malevolent forces, and the symbolic disorder associated with darkness. Priests may recite protective words elsewhere. Attendants may place objects in prescribed positions. Doors and seals create physical barriers while divine images create sacred ones. The palace becomes a layered defense in which administration, architecture, and belief overlap. Yet complete protection is impossible. Amenemhet's literary warning returns with particular force at night. The ruler attacked when he believed himself secure, surrounded by those who had eaten his bread and benefited from his favor. The text may not preserve exact history, but its lesson would have been understood by generations of scribes. The most dangerous moment is not always the battlefield. It may be the hour when confidence lowers its guard. Succession intensifies that danger. If the king dies during the night, information becomes power. Who knows first? Who controls the body, the doors, the seals, the treasury, the royal children, and the messengers leaving the palace? A natural death can still create a political emergency. Officials must decide when to announce it, how to protect the intended heir, and how to prevent rivals from acting. The quiet chamber can become, within minutes, the most contested space in Egypt. Even without crisis, guards monitor a sleeping body whose condition matters to the state. A sudden fever, difficulty breathing, or failure to wake would require action. Physicians may be called. Senior officials may gather before dawn. Ritual responses may begin alongside medical ones. The individual's vulnerability becomes institutional vulnerability because the king's health supports continuity in government and worship. Dreams may also disturb the night. Egyptian dream books classify visions as favourable or unfavourable, but they do not prove every royal dream was formally interpreted. A pharaoh might treat an unusual dream as meaningful, especially when it concerned gods, kingship, or danger. The dream stealer of Thutmose I presents a divine promise received beside the Sphinx, though its purpose is political legitimation rather than private memoir. Dreams could become useful when shaped into evidence that rule had been foretold. Outside the chamber, hours pass unevenly. One guard grows stiff, another listens to movement in a service court. A lamp sputters and is refilled. River sounds travel through the darkness. The palace appears silent only from far away. Within it, people continue to work so that the ruler can surrender consciousness without surrendering control. Near dawn, the sky begins to change again. Priests prepare to open sanctuaries. Bakers return to ovens. Scribes and attendants rise. The night has passed without visible breach, which is itself a form of success. No alarm is carved on a wall. No guarded doorway becomes history, and most of the labour vanishes with the darkness. The pharaoh sleeps a little longer, enclosed by brick, linen, flame, weapons, prayers, and human attention. Around him, the kingdom waits for the fragile proof it demands each morning that the ruler has survived the night, that the sun will rise, and that order can be performed once more. When the eastern sky begins to pale again, the palace returns to the threshold where this day began. Lamps still burn in guarded corridors, but their flames no longer command the darkness. Bakers stir ovens. Priests prepare to open sanctuaries. Scribes gather tablets and rolls, and servants carry fresh water toward rooms where the ruler sleeps. The kingdom is not restarting from nothing. It is continuing a cycle of labour, ritual, judgment, and watchfulness that never truly stopped. Soon the pharaoh will wake, and the same machinery will gather around his body once more. To imagine that moment responsibly, however, we must step back from the palace and look at the fragments from which this day has been built. No surviving Egyptian document records one complete royal day from dawn to night. No court scribe tells us exactly when a king opened his eyes, what he ate, which garment he chose, what letters were read first, or what private fear followed him into sleep. The reconstruction depends instead on evidence created for different purposes across different periods: palaces at Malqata and Amarna, temple ritual texts, court scenes in tombs, administrative records, diplomatic tablets, royal inscriptions, literary warnings, medical remains, and the much later account of Diodorus Siculus. Each source illuminates one part of the day while distorting another. Palace ruins reveal walls, floors, doorways, storage spaces, service zones, throne platforms, and private suites, but they rarely preserve the names of people moving through them. Tomb paintings show court protocol, foreign delegations, banquets, and royal reward, but they idealize status and compress events. Temple reliefs place the pharaoh before the gods, though priests usually carried out daily rites in his name. Diplomatic letters preserve urgent voices from abroad, yet only a fraction of the original archive survives. Diodorus provides the closest thing to a royal schedule, but he wrote centuries after the New Kingdom and shaped his account around an ideal of disciplined kingship. The result is not a diary, it is a composite. The ruler at the centre belongs most naturally to the New Kingdom, yet details surrounding him come from different reigns and institutions. His palace draws on Amenhotep III's Malqata and Akhenaten's Amarna. His foreign correspondence resembles the Amarna Letters. His sacred obligations reflect temple practice documented across long periods. His fear of conspiracy is sharpened by the teaching of Amenemhat and the assassination of Rameses III. These elements should not be collapsed into the claim that one known king experienced every event in a single day. Their value lies in revealing patterns of royal life that individual reigns express differently. What those patterns show is a kingship built upon controlled visibility. The pharaoh is rarely alone, but access to him is restricted. He's surrounded by attendants, guards, scribes, officials, priests, physicians, artisans, cooks, messengers, and relatives. His clothing, posture, location, and distance from others communicate rank before he speaks. Gold shines because miners, soldiers, transport crews, refiners, and jewelers have made it possible. Fine linen appears pure because fields, workshops, laundries, storerooms, and servants support it. A crown, even though no securely identified original survives, turns the royal head into a sign of territories joined under one office. The same pattern governs information. The king seems to know everything because reports arrive from across Egypt and beyond. But he knows only what survives travel, translation, selection, and presentation. A foreign ruler flatters or complains. A vassal exaggerates danger. A governor protects his reputation. A scribe chooses wording. A herald decides order. A vizier offers context. Royal power rests on information filtered by people whose loyalty can never be assumed completely. The palace magnifies authority, but it also creates dependence. Religion offers a similar contradiction. Officially, the pharaoh sustains the gods and presents mat to them. In practice, priests across the country act in his name. His presence is everywhere symbolically because his body cannot be everywhere physically. This delegation does not weaken kingship. It is what makes sacred kingship possible across a large territory. Yet it also reveals the scale of the burden. Every temple offering, restored sanctuary, successful flood, settled dispute, and defeated enemy becomes evidence that the king is maintaining order. Every failure threatens to suggest the opposite. The fear attached to the crown therefore cannot be reduced to terror of assassination, though assassination was real. It is the burden of maintaining appearances when reality remains uncertain. The river may rise poorly, a harvest may fail locally, a commander may conceal losses, a succession faction may gather quietly, a physician may be unable to protect the royal body, a temple may demand resources the treasury cannot easily provide. The pharaoh must appear stable while governing systems that are never fully stable. This does not mean every ruler lived in constant dread. Some may have enjoyed confidence, health, affection, ceremony, hunting, music, and the extraordinary privileges of power. Others may have been more suspicious, more isolated, or more deeply shaped by crisis. The record cannot recover those private differences with certainty. What it can show is that magnificence and vulnerability existed together. The ruler stood above others in art, but he still depended on food, sleep, water, information, medicine, and trust. He carried a divine office inside a mortal frame. A reconstructed day also corrects the scale of familiar spectacle. The king does not spend every hour in a golden crown, sailing in ritual procession, or personally serving every god. Great river festivals belong to exceptional dates, not ordinary mornings. Most government occurs through conversations, summaries, accounts, inspections, and delegated acts that leave little monumental drama. Even meals and family hours resist certainty, because banquet scenes and royal portraits express abundance, continuity, and legitimacy rather than routine. This quieter picture does not diminish the pharaoh. It makes his position more remarkable. He must convert mundane systems into sacred authority, grain into offerings, mining into radiance, paperwork into command, and guarded sleep into proof that the state continues. The surviving evidence repeatedly returns us to this conversion. The splendor at the center exists because countless ordinary actions are coordinated beyond the center, and the ruler's greatest performance is making that dependence look like effortless dominion. At dawn, that frame will rise again. Water will be brought, linen will be unfolded, reports will wait, priests will open shrines, officials will measure their words, guards will watch the same corridors they watched through the night. Gold may be placed upon the king, but its brightness will not remove the weight beneath it. The day will begin as ritual, administration, performance, and risk, all gathered around one human body expected to make the world appear ordered. And now the palace grows quieter in the imagination. The painted walls fade into shadow. The river beyond them becomes a soft line under the first light. We no longer hear the officials, the scribes, or the measured steps of guards. Their names have mostly disappeared, as have the private thoughts of the ruler they served. What remains are fragments, a clay tablet pressed by a careful hand, a floor painted with birds, a broken wall, a scar in a mummy's throat, a sealed shrine described in ritual words, and gold that still catches light after thousands of years. For a moment, the rooms seem near enough to enter. Then distance settles over them again. The painted ceilings are gone, the linen has turned to dust, and the morning voices cannot be recovered. Archaeology brings us close, but never all the way. It offers presence without possession, a doorway without the life that once moved through it. Time has removed the certainty that royal art once tried to create. The pharaoh who seemed larger than life is now known through ruins, labels, bones, and traces of pigment. The enemies beneath his sandals have lost their faces. The voices that praised him are incomplete. Even the crowns that made kingship instantly recognizable have vanished, leaving only their images on stone. Yet disappearance is not the same as silence. The palace still tells us that power required labor. The letters still tell us that empire was anxious and negotiated. The temples still tell us that order had to be renewed every day. The body still tells us that no office could defeat age, illness, or violence forever. Perhaps that is why the image of the waking pharaoh remains so compelling. It gathers the grandeur and fragility of history into a single moment. A ruler opens his eyes while a civilization waits outside the door. For a few hours, the world is arranged around him. Then evening comes. The crown is removed, the lamps are lit, and guards take their places again. Beyond the palace, the Nile continues northward. It carries silt, boats, reflections, and memories toward a sea no king can command. Dawn returns without asking who rules. In that pale light, gold loses its fire and becomes only metal, while the sleeping figure beneath it becomes what every ancient life eventually becomes, a story held for a little while in the fragile memory of the living.